This week on Dynasty Domain, we are diving into the 2023 rookie class. We're doing the first round of a mock draft with Dynasty players. Get into guys like Bijan Robinson, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. It should be really fun. I'm Avery Huffman.
I'm Nathan Schmidt.
I'm Simon Denny.
Welcome to Dynasty Domain. All right, so we are super thrilled to have you joining us today. Again, we're going to get into these 2023 rookies. It's now going to be a point of focus in Dynasty because we are ending this season here. We are in the playoffs, and people who are not in the playoffs, especially those with early picks, are already looking at who these rookies are, who we should be targeting, who do we like in this class. And so us three being obviously good Dynasty players, but having good resources, having good connections, we thought we would go ahead and bring on one of our buddies from DD, our director of content, and that is Jeremy Johnson. So welcome, Jeremy. We're glad to have you on again. You've obviously been on one of our videos, but we're excited to be able to talk with you about some of these guys today, with you being so knowledgeable about them. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, definitely. What a pleasure to have all three of the guys sitting there ready to do a show finally.
I know.
Welcome back.
Yeah, and it's been a while too. So yeah, and the other thing, I guess we're not going to introduce Simon at this point. He's gone most of the time, and when he's here, it's not that special.
He's boring.
Yeah. All right, a lot of stuff to cover on today. We're going to jump right into it. So again, we've done multiple mock drafts already this offseason. Offseason is technically not, but what we have found is that these rookie picks are, this is a deep class, and these rookie picks are correctly valued in terms of it is good that people have been acquiring these picks, because some of these players, some of these guys you're getting even in the late first and into the second round, you're going to find are very, very good compared to the depth of last year's class. So starting with the 101, there's really no surprise here. It's going to be Bijan Robinson, and look out for another video on Bijan Robinson from Dynasty Domain this week. But Jeremy, we'll start with you on all of these. I'll give you the first say, since you probably have watched them more than us. Tell us a little bit about Bijan, and is he valued correctly here? He's obviously going really high in startups, but what he does well and why he's such a generational prospect.
Definitely valued correctly. Big news for Bijan. He actually declared for the NFL draft today, so there was some concern that he potentially may stay with all the NIL money that he was getting with the Lamborghini endorsements and the Honey Dijon mustard endorsements and stuff like that as a running back. I think he'll probably – I don't think we'll see him get the draft capital that, say, like a Saquon or a Zeke or a Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, like that kind of top 10 capital. But, I mean, the Eagles do have like a top 10 pick they probably shouldn't have anyway, and that would be a lot of fun to put Bijan behind that offensive line that just absolutely mauls. But he former 5-star recruit. He's done nothing but just absolutely ball out in his time in Texas. Really good between the tackles. He's probably the best receiving back in the class too, which you can't really say a lot in terms of like a complete scale running back sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
he's good in a lot of areas of the game.
Yeah, there's very little, if anything to not like about Bijan Robinson. I think he's probably one of the best prospects we've ever seen. Especially, I wouldn't go as far as saying better than Saquon because we haven't seen his combine numbers yet, but a lot of promise here. We're excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I don't know if you all agree on this, but I think the only reason he's not getting the draft capital, or presumably getting the draft capital of those, Zeke, Saquon, Fournette, etc., is because the NFL's learned how to value running backs better.
It's changed. Yeah, the valuation of running backs in the NFL.
It's not a slight to him as a prospect at all.
So, obviously, not a lot to say. Everybody knows his name. Everybody knows who he is. We're going to, this is not somebody that's going to be a new name to people. If you have the 101, you're taking Bijan Robinson or you're trading it. Again, look out for another video on that this week. All right, at the 102, the first quarterback off the board, and this has been interesting to me. Let's go ahead and talk about the 102 and the 103 together here, because honestly, I saw a lot even just 6 months ago where CJ Stroud was going over Bryce Young, but in this particular mock draft and in most mock drafts, not only for the NFL but for Dynasty, now you're seeing Bryce Young pretty consistently go over CJ Stroud. So it's Bryce Young at the 102, CJ Stroud at the 103. So JC, I want to get your thoughts on, is this the order you're going to take them in? Why has Bryce Young leapfrogged C.J. Stroud? What do you think? How do you think their landing spots are going to impact this? And is this where you think they should be going in terms of where they're going in the draft?
Yeah, so probably around 6 months ago, I would have also said that I had C.J. Stroud as my QB1 in this class. I think he brings that prototypical size, good pocket awareness, has really good touch. And, I mean, he's just been very good the last few years. He's played with incredible talent on the outside at the receiving position. But overall, he's really not done anything to make you think that he can't play quarterback at the NFL level. I think what it comes down to is that, unfortunately, there's a little bit of Ohio State bias in terms of quarterback production, and that there's been a lot of players that have come out that we thought were going to be can't-miss guys, and they ended up hurting dynasty owners and franchises in general. I think what Bryce Young really brings, he's got incredible arm strength. I actually posted a video on Twitter a couple weeks ago, and a lot of Alabama fans have liked it, retweeted it, commented on it, because they know the arm strength's there, and it's not even just the 60-yard bombs that he's thrown to Jameson Williams last year. He's really good at processing like the quick hitter 15-yard out routes, which is a lot more important for an NFL quarterback. But he has the intangibles. He has incredible pocket awareness. He's so good in the pocket. He never gets tackled on the first attempt, and he has good feet, good mobility. I think the knock on Stroud and why he's probably below Young is because he's just kind of fallen flat in the biggest games of his career, and people are going to wonder if he can carry a franchise that's probably going to draft him to be a high pick, and the team's not going to be very good around him.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you there, JC, for the just the positive thing we've seen with Bryce Young this season is I think his poise under pressure in the pocket has just been phenomenal. From some of the passes he's made in the red zone on third down plays where there's no option available, his reads aren't there, the play just goes to crap, and then he finds an open receiver, an open tight end, and it's like within a split second. I mean, it's out of his hands and into a receiver's hands, and it's a touchdown. Like, it's just really impressive stuff we've seen there. With Stroud, though, I mean, Avery, you probably have looked into Stroud the most out of any of us. You like him the most out of any of us. I kind of want to hear what you have to say about Stroud. What are sort of your reasons for why Stroud maybe hasn't shown up of recent in college in those big games, and how that really probably doesn't affect his value as a quarterback prospect?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm not the only one that has seen this. I mean, you saw, again, C.J. Stroud going 101. I mean, as recent as 6 months ago, and now you've seen, even the guys who are connected with NFL sources are saying, yeah, it's probably going to be Bryce Young. So really,
you're talking 101 in the NFL.
Yes,
draft.
yeah.
Yes.
So in terms of validity of my opinion, probably not super high, but for me, when I'm watching CJ Stroud, and I've obviously liked him, I think he's, I love his arm, I love his touch and his accuracy. I think he makes NFL level throws. I think he, and this is just a hunch, and I think you're seeing a quarterback who still has some developing to do, and especially in terms of pocket awareness. Now, there obviously I think are going to be some intangibles that can't be taught, that Bryce Young is going to have the advantage over, and you've just kind of seen that from a natural athletic ability. And I think that makes a little bit of sense to me as to why Young has kind of jumped over Stroud in terms of arm talent, and obviously the rushing thing for Young is important as well. In terms of arm talent, and size, I have struggled to see, to justify why Bryce Young has jumped this far over CJ Stroud, but that's just from a personal, opinion standpoint. Like, I'm watching his film. I love his arm talent. I think he makes NFL level throws, and for me, like,
kind of compared him to Deshaun Watson in terms of arm talent.
So, and I don't know, Jeremy, you may not think you. Tell me if you think this is a valid comparison even, but when I watch his college tape in terms of, his accuracy and his arm, like, he reminds me a lot of a young Deshaun Watson. That's what I really like even now, but more so, at Clemson and early when he would play the Colts twice a year. I loved watching Deshaun Watson because of the way he threw, because of the accuracy in his throws. He was brilliant with the football in terms of his placement. And so I see a lot of that in Stroud too. And so I think some of this is personal preference. But at the same time, you're going to have to look most importantly at how the NFL values these guys. If Bryce Young is going at the 101 in the NFL, then, there's pretty much no question that you should probably be taking him over over Stroud in startup drafts unless you have a really strong conviction. Which for me, I think the NFL draft capital would be the strongest conviction for me, stronger than any personal feelings. Do you have a comp for Stroud and Young by chance, Jeremy? Who are guys that you see similarities with these guys in?
Honestly, I think the closest thing to Bryce Young, and the comparison was given to Kyler and almost like a little bit to Baker in some respects, but I truly think he is the closest thing to Russell Wilson that we've seen.
I think so too.
Prime Russell in terms of ability to throw that deep ball down the sidelines. He actually throws the ball over the middle of the field a lot more than Russell Wilson does as well. His arm strength, for as slight of his body that he is, being like 5'11", 190 is probably what he's at right now. Because you see him in like those Heisman commercials with Kyler Murray standing next to him, and he definitely isn't as thick as Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray is he was 5'10", 207 at the combine. If Bryce Young is 200 pounds at the combine, I'd be thrilled if I were his agent. I don't know if he's.
Yeah,
and that's the only knock on Bryce Young. I saw Dane Bugler comp C.J. Stroud to a little more athletic version of Jared Goff. I wouldn't be thrilled with a little more athletic version of Jared Goff if I were.
That makes me sick.
He's running quite the offense in Detroit.
Yeah, Goff hasn't been horrible, and in terms of being a fantasy asset, he hasn't been bad this year. If you're looking at a more athletic version of Stroud or a more athletic version of Goff, what would Goff be if he were more athletic? It could be pretty good.
I would like to think that Stroud's arm is going to develop into a better arm.
Yeah, I think the point is the NFL team with the 101 is going to shoot for the stars. And the one thing, I've only watched two games of CJ Stroud on film. I've watched actively, but not scouting him. And the one thing that worries me is his ability to anticipate wide receivers coming open. Because he's had such skilled wide receivers, and he always finds them if they're running open. But you have to, as an NFL quarterback, anticipate when that break is coming and put the ball there before they've even started.
You have to throw them open.
Yeah, exactly. And I just saw a couple times where he missed someone when they broke open. They break and they're 5 yards away from someone, and he missed it because he wasn't anticipating it.
Yeah, and I think that's all development.
Again,
could have just been
really
those two games.
That goes back to then just to wrap this up. That goes back to my hope. My hope, liking CJ Stroud and trying to stay away from that, Ohio State bias, is that we are seeing somebody who's raw and who needs some polishing from a good NFL QB. I think his landing spot's going to be really important in terms of who's going to develop him as a quarterback. I do think there are some things he can continue to pick up, and I hope that is the case for CJ Stroud. So, all right, moving on. At the 104, we've got Jahmyr Gibbs. So, and Jeremy's actually the one that I think sent me this, but we're going to mention this again just because it was the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. With Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't remember the guy's name that said this, but he was talking about how people just assume that running backs are going to come in and take over backfields right away, which to some extent there's some truth there. Not all running backs are going to do that. And he said, I'd be thrilled if Jahmyr Gibbs were James Cook this year. And this is not a James Cook knock. This is a knock on the guy that said that. So Jeremy, you have higher expectation for Gibbs, I'm assuming. I hope.
That would be very unfortunate if he turns into a team.
Yeah.
Especially spend the 104 on him in a rookie draft. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love James Cook. I think it's going to happen here sooner or later. I think he's shown that he's gotten better over the season. But
I'm not going to get it.
I'd be thrilled at 104 that I'm taking James Cook and just letting the dice fall where they may. I wouldn't be thrilled with that. I know me and you have talked about Jahmyr Gibbs. He's not my RB2 in the class. I do think that he's an incredibly good receiver out of the backfield, and I think that he's going to be able to line up outside of the numbers in the slot. He's going to be able to be used as a receiving back, and he may not get 15, 20 carries a game between the tackles, but they'll give him 10, 12, maybe 15 carries along with that receiving work. The guy, everybody wants to compare him to Alvin Kamara. I think, I've made the mistake. A lot of people have made the mistake of wanting to constantly compare receiving running backs coming out of college to Alvin Kamara. Yep. It's just not the same. Alvin Kamara is an absolute freak when it comes to contact balance and hand-eye coordination and route running out of the backfield. There's just nobody else in the NFL that could do what he does. I think he's a lot closer to like an Aaron Jones.
Yes, that is also my comp for him.
And
Simon, Avery actually just said that about 2 days ago. So
really, yeah. And Simon, what are your quick thoughts on Gibbs? I know you're probably the lowest on him compared to all of us, but what's kind of the knock that you have on him?
Well, I mean, it sounds bad, but he's small. I mean, he's only 200 pounds. His BMI is it's under 28. And you know, that's when running backs in the NFL, like JC just said, he's not going to be taking 20 carries a game. It'll be like 12 to 15. But still, to hold up, we've seen the other small guys in the NFL that we were really high on, namely DeAndre Swift, who just can't handle the volume and get hurt repeatedly. And personally, I will just be passing on Jahmyr Gibbs. I like Sean Tucker more, honestly, and I really like Zach Evans still. As much as I hate Ole Miss.
Ooh.
Wow. So I'm personally, if I have that pick, I'd be trading it away and hoping for one of those guys later on.
Yeah, honestly, and personally for me too, I think I'm probably passing up on Gibbs, betting on one of those other high-end receivers there, and then I'm going to take my chances on an Akane or a Charbonnet in the second round.
Yeah. You just said
a Kane.
A Kane. Sorry, my bad.
Akane. Freaking weirdo. Okay, so I'll give you my spiel real quick. So I took this. I am actually the one that took Gibbs here, and I took him at the end of the 4th round. So for me, like, although people may not be super high on Jahmyr Gibbs, I do think either I'm not drafting him for a rookie running back. I'm not drafting him near at a ceiling, so he does have room to grow here if he were to develop into a good NFL running back and a good PPR back. And I want to put the emphasis on PPR. My hope for Jahmyr Gibbs, and I totally agree about carries between the tackles. I don't think you're going to see him getting high volume, workhorse level production in terms of on the ground. I think this is going to be a very landing spot dependent player in fantasy in terms of how they use him. Again, I think Aaron Jones, I watched Jahmyr Gibbs and I literally am like, that is baby Aaron Jones right there. And part of what makes Aaron Jones so valuable in Dynasty and so valuable in fantasy and such a good producer is because he is on an elite offense with an elite passing quarterback, which I think that, when you're talking about going through your reads and being able to hit your checkdowns, guys like Rashad White, even in Tampa Bay, are benefiting from Tom Brady being one of the best check down quarterbacks of all time. But not only that, where he lands, I think, him being paired with somebody who can be a bruiser running back, just like Aaron Jones is paired with A.J. Dillon, is going to be important for Gibbs because, again, he's not going to be that workhorse running back. And then it's going to be a matter of, number one, can he stay healthy? And number two, can he get enough volume in the passing game to really make a difference in fantasy from a production standpoint? And I think that I'm obviously optimistic. I'm obviously optimistic he'll go somewhere, but this is going to be a very landing spot dependent pick. So,
yeah.
And just add one quick thing, real quick. I know we've all kind of sounded like we're like down on Jahmyr Gibbs. If you look into what Todd McShay's saying, what Mel Kiper's reporting, what a lot of these mock draft experts are reporting, it looks like that he potentially could get like back end of the first round draft capital. So like if he's a first round pick at running back, he's going to be a top 5 pick in your rookie
and
draft.
He should be.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, if he has that draft capital, I would personally feel like getting him at the end of the 4th is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's when you decide trust the NFL.
Which pre-draft we're all obviously speculating, but that's kind of where the market lays for him. So
let's kind of combine the 105 through the 107 here with the 3 wide receivers that go next.
Good idea. So at the 105, Quentin Johnson, TCU. And at 106, we've got JSN, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. And then at the 107, we've got Jordan Addison. So with Johnson, with JSN, with Addison, JC, give us your breakdown on these 3 guys, surface level. These obviously are the first 3 receivers off the board in a receiving class that I would wager, now that we're on the other end of it, is probably not as deep as last year's receiving class. What are you thinking about these guys? Who do you like the most actually out of these? I'm curious to know what order you take these guys in, what their strengths are, et cetera. So give us the breakdown on these 3 receivers here.
Yeah. So I like all 3 of them. I think all 3 of them are going to be really good pros. I took Quentin Johnston here at the 105. I think that he is the highest ceiling of the 3. If you look at like his advanced metrics, like yards per target per route run, yards per target per team attempt, all these things, they all point to him being an elite player, an elite playmaker on a team that, like the conference they play in, they spread the ball out, they throw it around a lot, but he could do a lot of things with the ball in his hands, and his size at 6'4" or 210. I mean, he's going to be a freak at the combine.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to end up getting drafted in the top half of the first round. The guy that I compare him to, I'm a Steelers fan. I saw this comparison from Full-Time Dame on Twitter, and I just can't get the comparison out of my head. It was like he was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't quite put who it is I was thinking of. He looks like Martavis Bryant. Like he catches the ball and he just explodes with the ball in his hands. It's almost like his brain is working too fast for his body once he gets the ball in his hands. And then he's seeing all these possibilities that where he could go, what he could do with it. Now he could absolutely, because I think he's more raw than these other two guys here, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jordan Addison. Now, if he doesn't go to the right situation, he could flop. I don't envision a scenario where Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jordan Addison go into the NFL and they flop. I just don't think that's going to happen. They're too good at route running. They're too good at creating separation. They're fairly good athletes. So I think wherever they end up going, they're going to be productive. The Addison knock will be that he doesn't weigh enough, but we've seen Devonta Smith here 2 of the last 3 weeks just absolutely eviscerate NFL defenses. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba comes from wide receiver U. Ohio State just cranks out receiver after receiver after receiver. Last year, he outproduced Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave at Ohio State with C.J. Stroud. He had 1,600 yards receiving last season. Before this year, it was almost like he silent quit this year. Like he had a hand injury but didn't play. So if I had to rank it, I think the highest upside is Quentin Johnston. I think the other two in Addison and JSN are much safer though.
Yeah. Jordan Addison, better or not as good as Devonta Smith?
Oh.
I would have to give Devonta Smith the edge.
Yeah, I think we would too.
Yeah. I do have one question. So what if one of JSN or Jordan Addison were to go to Kansas City? Because, I mean, they still don't have a prime wide receiver one there. Or Green Bay. Let's say Jordan Addison pairs up with Christian Watson in Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. What would that do for you? Would that be enough to move them up over Quentin Johnston?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah. So,
I don't think they're far enough apart. Like if you're telling me Quentin Johnston gets drafted by the Texans and the Texans take Bryce Young, and then I get Jordan Addison with Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, I'll take Jordan Addison.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I think we'd give the edge to Devonta too, but I think the size argument is fairly out the window now for these elite wide receiver prospects. So,
and I think Jackson Smith-Njigba's performance last year kind of spoke for itself. We didn't really need to see much this year. Sad we couldn't see more, but I really think we could be approaching this NFL draft and even after the draft, after his landing spot, and really looking at specifically JSN being a buy of these three receivers, because it almost seems like the new cool thing to fade him a bit. With Johnson, I know you, Simon, really love him. I really liked watching his film. We kind of compared some of his physical aspects to certain current receivers in the NFL, guys like Mike Williams with his vertical ability, his route running, his poise, his shiftiness, sort of like to that of DeAndre Hopkins. But again, I definitely see the situation where he could flop.
He is nowhere on D-Hop's level with route running. Let's get that correct.
No. But his ability to No, obviously not.
I get what you're saying.
The comps.
Nathan's right. D-Hop does suck. So.
Oh, that's true. I forgot Nathan thought that. That is.
All right, moving on to the 108. Let's talk about.
I'm curious to know. The 108 is Zach Evans out of Ole Miss. I'm curious to know, JC, was this your running back 2 in the class?
Yeah, so my eyes tell me that he's the RB2, but my heart doesn't. So I think he's got the prototypical size. He has the 5-star acumen. I mean, him and Bijan were the only 2 5-star running backs in this class for recruits. So that tells you the kind of prospect that Zach Evans was coming into college. I mean, he was being sought after by Georgia, by Alabama. He ended up going to TCU, and he was good for TCU, but he's struggled to get the workhorse role that you want to see from running backs. But then there's the whole argument of Do they have too much work in college? Like, is there too much tread on the tires? Are we sure that if they're a workhorse for 3 years that they're going to last past their rookie contract in the NFL? So you can see it as a good thing, or you could read the reports from Zach Evans that he has character concerns and stuff like that coming out of high school. It doesn't seem like that's a problem now. I mean, if you watch any interviews with him and Quinshon Judkins and at Ole Miss this year, that'll be the other knock, that Quinshon Judkins like outplayed him. I think Evans was playing with an injury for much of the season, and he probably almost in a sense silent quit, kind of like Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, he knew that he was probably going to go into the draft and didn't want to force anything. But he has the size, and he has pretty decent receiving ability as well. That he probably could be a workhorse running back.
Yeah, and so I kind of agree with you. So when I went and watched some Zach Evans tape just last week. My eyes just lit up for this dude. Like, watching him on tape, I was really impressed, and again, the size, the athleticism, I just think it's there. So I think really my concern is that I haven't been hearing a lot about Zach Evans in terms of, buzz to NFL teams. And so I think the biggest, I think this is the case with any prospect, but I think my biggest concern right now is the lack of buzz that he's getting and how his draft capital sorts itself out. Because I do think if you see him go as the 4th or 5th, even sliding the 6th running back off the board, like, that's going to be fairly telling in terms of how NFL teams are evaluating him. And obviously, that ends up being the best. Wow, that's good. The best determination of some of these guys' values. So I think I'm with you. My eyes tell me that Zach Evans is very, very good, but it's hard for me to rank him that high personally in my own running back rankings. Just because, number one, there's a ton of good running backs in this class. But number two, I that's the only thing I worry about is whether or not an NFL team is going to see, obviously they see better and more in what they're going to see in Zach Evans. So
yeah, and we'll see where he goes. So in the draft, and that'll obviously be very telling if it's early second rounds.
Yeah. All right. Back to the quarterback position here at the 109. This is going to be Will Levis from Kentucky, the third quarterback here. He's 6'3", 222 out of Kentucky, and obviously we are hoping he goes to the Indianapolis Colts. So I can already tell you, I can already know, JC, you're going to say, pretty much the same thing that everybody has started to give him credit for. While he didn't put up, he didn't floor people with his numbers this year, he also didn't play in the best situation from a talent standpoint, from an offensive line standpoint, and that probably contributed to some of this. But this is interesting because, if Will Levis does get top 10 draft capital in the NFL, I think there's an argument to be made that he could be taken higher than this in startup drafts, just purely based on the scarcity of the quarterback position currently in Dynasty, and then also, him having that draft capital. So, all right, give us your breakdown on Levis. Assuming, I think at this point he'll go in the top 10. That's just my gut feeling, but thoughts on him in terms of, from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, I think here at the 109, 110, we got these guys going here because we don't know what the draft capital is going to be. I think with Young and Stroud, it's fairly certain that they're going to get the draft capital. So these are kind of just, we got to put these quarterbacks in the first round of the Superflex draft because it's a Superflex league. So the quarterbacks are going to go. And these two guys are absolutely dripping in tools that you want as a quarterback. But yeah, I mean, Levis's situation, like you highlighted a little bit, it wasn't the greatest. So like Liam Cohn, like his offensive coordinator, like he left, he went to the Rams, and now he's going back to Kentucky. But Graham Mertz is going to be the quarterback there now, not Will Levis. And his two best receivers were true freshmen in Barry and Brown and Dane Key. So he lost Wan'Dale Robinson to the NFL draft. Wan'Dale had, I believe, like a 38% target share in college. So you're talking about an obscene amount of targets and looks being thrown to one receiver. And then his starting running back, Chris Rodriguez, was out for over half the season with the DUI. So you're talking about a lot of guys that he lost in a new offensive system. I believe this is his 4th year in college. So he played at Penn State as a freshman, but they didn't play him over Sean Clifford, so he left and went to Kentucky. So, but yeah, I mean, strongest arm in the class. I don't think it's up for debate, really. Strongest arm in the class. He's so athletic too. Like you could go find clips of this last year of him just hurdling people, and he's 6'3".
Yep.
So he is a very good athlete at the quarterback position. Strong arm. I think NFL teams are gonna love him. Obviously, So yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think he definitely goes higher than the 109 once draft capital is assigned and stuff.
Yeah, and he's a bit of a project. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where he does go in that draft, because we kind of, as Dynasty players, see Will Levis. If you're a real big fan of him and you kind of look at him, you're like, okay, this guy can potentially have the ceiling of what we'd want to see in like a Josh Allen. He has that athletic ability to have that rushing upside, but he's also able to stay in the pocket and make some really accurate throws downfield. And then you see the floor of like, man, this guy could end up being like Sam Darnold. And it's pretty terrifying. I mean, seeing the interceptions have been a concern. They were for Darnold coming out of college. He had the arm strength, he had the athleticism, and he just never took that step up in the NFL. And that's going to be a risk that any team who drafts Levis in the NFL will have to take when they draft him. And I personally, as a major Colts fan, I think it's worth the risk. I want to see what he can do. I think anything is a level up from what we've had at quarterback over the last few years. But
Don't say.
I mean, in terms of the film, I don't know what you can really, really dislike about Will Levis. It's more of just a question, can he take that extra step in the NFL? So.
Yeah. All right, staying at the quarterback position here, at the 110 went AR-15, Anthony Richardson, quarterback out of Florida. And you're talking about athletically gifted quarterbacks. I mean, you cannot go. I mean, it is hard to find one more gifted than this one. I have a lot of questions personally about some of his intangibles and habits as a quarterback. But go. I want to.
And his tangibles, bro. Always got some question marks.
Jeremy, go ahead and that is funny. Give us your breakdown on Anthony Richardson. I actually don't think I've talked to you about Anthony Richardson, so I'm curious. I know you think that if he gets the draft capital, like he's going to be going really high in these startups. So
yeah, I mean, you've seen it with any quarterback that could run the ball. I mean, they go so much higher than what they're actually capable of as a passer. I mean, Jalen Hurts preseason, before we even knew that he was going to take this next step in Philly, I mean, he was going second round, maybe early third in most startups. So, when you can run the ball as a quarterback, it already protects your floor. Trey Lance, same thing. He was going back into the first, early second, really hadn't played that much. So that's what's going to happen with Anthony Richardson, as long as he's drafted in like the first or second round. Even if he's like a mid-second round pick, I still think he's going to go higher than the 110.
Yep.
The only thing that I'll say about Anthony Richardson is that it's a fairly simple system at Florida. Like, he's not really asked to do a ton because they run the ball a lot and then they use his athleticism. He has fairly decent pocket awareness. The only thing that he really suffers from is he kind of lets his legs drift out from underneath of him because his arm is so strong that he doesn't create like a solid base to throw the ball, that it's a lot of arm a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So, but that'll come with, hopefully him like understanding an NFL passing system and stuff like that, which he hasn't really been asked to do. I don't know what the play calling is like in, the Florida huddle, the verbiage and stuff like that. But Anthony Richardson, I mean, if he goes to the right situation, I could see him going 102. I could see him going right after Bijan Robinson. Like that's the kind of ceiling that he has.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of what landing spot does he get,
Yeah, I personally not the biggest Anthony Richardson fan. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know. It's hard for me. Although the rushing upside, obviously raises that ceiling, and I do think it's probably going to be justified where he goes. It's a guy I'm going to stay away from because I worry. There are so many other factors that I worry about him. Translating to the NFL in terms of quarterback play.
He is so insanely underdeveloped. Like,
yeah,
I literally see him and I'm like, this is just, if someone drafts him in the early first round, this is a ceiling pick, and this is like drafting an even more underdeveloped player than a guy like Trey Lance. And it just, that terrifies me because we don't even know what Trey Lance is. I watched a decent amount of AR film, and some of his throws are ridiculous. Like, they are insane.
He's very talented.
It's wild. And then you're like, oh, he went 9 for 27 against Florida State.
Yeah.
And he's just wildly inaccurate sometimes. So,
any thoughts on AR?
No, you pretty much said it.
Yeah. I don't think there's a ton to be said. I mean, it's going to be really a lot of these guys again draft dependent. 111, Michael Mayer. Obviously, this is a tight end that goes in the first round of a startup draft. We didn't have those last year, but Michael Mayer is projected to go in the first round. I would be surprised if he slid anywhere past the first 20 picks. Maybe he goes late first, but I think he's locked into the first at this point in terms of where he's being mocked. He's being mocked to by guys who would know what they're talking about. So I know you like Michael Mayer, Jeremy. Give me what you like about him. Why you think he deserves this type of capital?
I mean, he's the most complete tight end prospect that we've seen in a really long time at the tight end position. I mean, Kyle Pitts is an athletic freak, obviously, but you're not really asking Kyle Pitts to get down in line in 3-point stance and come off the ball and seal off an edge for a running back. Like, that's not going to happen really with Kyle Pitts. Michael Mayer is more than capable of doing that. So the fact that he's capable of doing that means that not only is he going to be out in the field for every single play, but the play action system is going to work really well wherever he ends up going, because he is a great blocker as well as a good receiver. From the time that he was 18 years old, it was a true freshman at Notre Dame. His first game was against Duke. He's just out there just dragging, third, fourth, fifth-year players on his lower body. He's an absolute truck. He's going to be probably 6'4", maybe 6'5", like 250, 255, but he's so thick. Like his build is unlike a lot of guys in the NFL right now. Really good yak ability. Unfortunately for him, he hasn't really been able to kind of showcase his separation because the quarterback play that he's had through much of his college career has been lackluster at best. So a lot of the time, it looks like he's not actually creating separation on his film, but that's just because the quarterbacks don't see the play develop until they're like, oh, shit, like I'm under pressure. Mike's down there somewhere. Let me throw it. And then Michael Mayer jumps up and rips the ball away from two defenders and then ends up dragging one of them for like 7 yards more. I think he's probably one of the safer picks in the entire class, especially with the landscape of the Dynasty tight end system right now. I can't envision a scenario to where he's not one of the top 5 tight ends off the board when startups start up in like February, March, April area.
You guys' thoughts on Michael Mayer?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of early success, really, even this year from rookie tight ends like Greg Dulcich, Daniel Bellinger, Cade Otton, etc. And the common denominator between all those, I mean, Chig Okonkwo too, is that they're fast, and they're able to, they're translating that success in the receiving game in college to the NFL because of that. And the thing I worry about with Michael Mayer is that he's not, like, he doesn't look fast, and maybe, like JC said, is that's just his quarterback play. But I would worry about, in college he's beating these other college linebackers, most of whom are not pro caliber. They're not NFL players. So how's that going to go when he switches to the NFL? But you also wonder, you look at George Kittle, who's out there every single play, and who has the ability as a blocker, and you're like, well, this is fantasy. We don't care if he can block, because what if he's like George Kittle, and some games it means he's out there the entire game, but he gets 3 targets because he's playing left tackle.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on that. I understand that. One, I mean, the nice thing about blocking, though, is that does give him more opportunity to be on the field. But on top of that, like, Michael Mayer could be awesome. I need to look into it more. I think from what I've seen, he looks really great, and I'm kind of on JC there when he's talking about his talent level. Oh, yeah. But I just can't get behind taking really almost any tight end in the first round of any rookie draft just because of how bare the landscape is in fantasy. Because do you really expect Michael Mayer? Like, the only time it would be worth it is if he's a top 6 dynasty tight end.
Sure.
Where he ends up being worth a 23 first.
Yeah.
Like, the chances of him getting to that and actually being an elite producer in fantasy, I think, is maybe lower than people would think. This is just my preliminary thoughts on drafting tight ends in the first round, especially in this class. I feel like you could get a receiver or a running back who has a higher chance at producing at that level that you would expect. I'm not sure.
I do think the best argument for taking Michael Mayer here, like Jeremy said, is because the tight end landscape in Dynasty has kind of presented itself as fairly bare, which is something we weren't necessarily like anticipating in terms of some of the lower end like tight end ones that we had ranked coming into the season. Guys like Noah Fant, guys like Irv Smith, even guys that have come completely. I mean, Noah Fant's not been bad, but I mean, they're not. You're talking about the tier drop off between the elite tight ends and those guys is so big. So it's just, I think it's going to be a matter of can he jump into that elite tier of tight ends. You know, the speed is obviously something. You know, the game has evolved to where speedier tight ends are now becoming more and more useful in today's NFL. However, you know, with somebody like Mayer, I do think there is still a place for that type of player. It's just, I think this is again going to be landing spot dependent. Like this is going to just depend on how the team that drafts him uses him. He is a fairly safe pick because of the capital he's going to get. But I do think it's going to be a situationally dependent, in terms of where he goes here. And I do think at the end of the first round, drafting a tight end with first round draft capital. I mean, we've seen it with Hawk now, who has consistently pretty much underperformed and has just flashed even recently. His stock is already here, in the early 5, late 4 range, if you get my drift. So I think he will retain his value fairly well because he's going to be drafted that high. So, all right, let's wrap this thing up. The 112. A guy that I really, really like, and I don't think there's a single person here that doesn't like this guy, is Sean Tucker. So Sean Tucker, I would put, in the second. I think Bijan's in his own tier at the top. Sean Tucker, I'd put him in the second tier, and who I'd probably put, when my eyes tell me Zach Evans. Obviously, I like Gibbs enough to probably put him in that tier. But then I think Sean Tucker is in that tier. I wouldn't be willing to move him down a complete tier. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And JC's going to lay him out for us. He is a PPR back. If you cannot tell, I love PPR backs. That is why I took Gibbs here at the end of the 4th. The guys that can develop into those pass-catching running backs in the NFL, for some reason, I mean, they just get my goat. I love Sean Tucker because of his ability to work in the receiving game, because of his explosiveness. He is extremely explosive. He is such an athlete, and I really think that could translate to the NFL in terms of how a team uses him. But Jeremy, give us your thoughts real quick to wrap this up on Sean Tucker.
Yeah, so I alluded to when I said Zach Evans, if I was watching with my eyes, that he would be my RB2. If I watched game with my heart, Sean Tucker would be my RB2. He's gonna, like, guys that like BMI. Like I know BMI was referenced. The BMI boys are gonna love Sean Tucker. His
5'10", 210. Oh, 5'10", 210 pounds, and a 30 BMI. So he's perfect right there.
His thighs are gigantic. His thigh pads are even bigger. When you talk about the Syracuse lineage at the running back position with Jim Brown and Floyd Little and Ernie Davis and all those guys, he's going to carry the torch for those guys. Like you said, PPR monster. If you follow like data analytics, he has a screenplay against Louisville week 1 of this season where he hits 21.9 miles per hour, and it looks like he is just on he's on jet fuel when he's running down the sideline on this play. There's nobody even. I would venture to guess 25 yards. There's nobody within 25 yards of him when he catches this ball and runs down. It hits like that second gear. The part of me is like, I think he could potentially end up being like if you look at like his advanced metrics, they're all like extremely good. Like him and a guy that we're not going to mention in this draft in this first part, but second part he'll be covered. They both have very good advanced metrics. Part of me just thinks, what would happen if, say, like the Chiefs, like just use like their late first round pick. I know they used it on Clyde and it didn't work out the way they wanted it to, but if they could get a guy like this with that kind of skill set that they were envisioning to use Clyde for, I mean, the sky would be the limit.
It's like Kareem Hunt all over again in KC, but better.
Yeah, I mean, even you've seen Jarrett McKinnon step in KC and like ultra produce because he's being used correctly.
Yeah.
So
yep.
Yeah, I love Sean Tucker. You guys have any thoughts on Sean Tucker before I wrap this up with my thoughts?
Nope, he's my RB2 in the class as well, so I think we're all on the same page.
All right, yeah. So DD, obviously high on Sean Tucker here. I again, it's early, and we know that, and we had to mention this, it just came up every time. It's going to be landing spot dependent for a lot of these guys. Draft capital is huge. It should be the most important thing in most people's mind here, especially as you're playing Dynasty, because you are not a better evaluator than NFL scouts are. You just aren't that good. I mean, JC is the best out of probably the 3 of us, for sure. I mean, you could hear how knowledgeable he is, and he would even admit the draft capital is absolutely king. Like, I mean, it is very, very important. So it'll be landing spot dependent too, but we're going to do a ton of analysis this offseason for these rookies. So make sure you subscribe to the channel because we are going to be coming out with all types of rookie content. We're going to be doing it all offseason until the draft. We're going to have all kinds of videos on specific players. We're going to do plenty of mock drafts. We'll keep you updated on who's falling, who's rising, who the values are, etc. So it'd be a great time to subscribe. Make sure you've got all the analysis at your fingertips. Make sure you like this video, and that's going to wrap us up for today. So thanks for making it this far. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate all of you. This has been Dynasty Domain.